Now, our replacement speaker is Maxwell Hoffmann, and he's going to talk about saying more with less, writing for a global audience.
Great, thank you. Anybody who knows me knows that saying more with less is kind of an ironic topic for me, but I'm going to manage to do that. Thank you so much. I work for Adobe. We actually hope to be a sponsor next year. Found out about the conference late, so I am actually Maxwell Hoffmann, private citizen, and you're only going to hear Adobe a couple times. You'll be happy to know. Anyway, my title is, I'm the global product evangelist for TechCom, so it's basically FrameMaker, RoboHelp, and all of those products. And I am based here in Portland, Oregon. I'm local, and I'll have a contact at the end for anybody who's interested in following. The only thing you need to know on the first slide, anybody that wants to reach me, is that my email has one N due to a character limitation by Adobe on email. And this is really important, everybody in this room, I command you to follow me on Twitter, and it's Maxwell Hoffmann with 2 Germanic N's, because there is a 1N Maxwell Hoffmann who's younger and better looking than me, and he lives here in Portland, Oregon. So if you see a nice guy with a full head of hair pop up, it's not him. That's the wrong guy. He's okay if you want financial advice. Okay, kicking it off here, and I'm going to go ahead and hope that I'm just going to hope that it's working. There, see, that's the one you want. That's my picture on Twitter. Pick that guy. So anyway, the reason I'm speaking on this topic, I had over 12 years recently in the translation agency, working in language translation and also in localization. Learned a lot because I was working with other people's documents, and also have worked a great deal with SGML, XML, etc. I'm going to confine this topic to the writing portion of preparing your source language for reaching a global audience effectively. I'm really not going to go into data, XML, content reuse, how wonderful it is to have your data chunked out. That's really a completely separate topic. My product FrameMaker does that beautifully, but we'll save that for another day. The main takeaway here is, in spite of all my incredible experience, I really don't know any more than you do, because we are in the middle of the second decade of the 21st century and nobody has any idea what's going to happen for the next 5 years. So if you have any consultants out there telling you they've got the secret sauce, don't believe them. Just come back next year. Okay, the reason I have this slide here, it's not moving. Is there a delay? Oh, there it is. What's going on here? I see a different slide on my screen. Should I do something here? Maybe I have to resume slideshow. Let's see if that does it. Come on. Basically, this is the inevitable history slide, which we'll get through real quick. Cuneiform tablets. Back in those days, we were gods. Anybody who knew how to read and write, which was a very tiny handful of tech writers back in Mesopotamia, we actually were thought to have secret special powers. We were worshipped like cats in Egypt. And how many people here have cats, writers that have cats show up when you write? Okay, that's why. Like they know. It just happens. We went on to scrolling, showed up pretty early, obviously movable type, television, I can kind of almost remember that. I won't tell you what first program I remember because it would be pretty frightening, but anyway, and finally the World Wide Web, and then again, back to tablets. The reason I picked a BlackBerry was just because it's the only thing that looks like someone's typing. Modern devices are a little bit too pancreatic. Smaller screens, shorter chunks of content, shorter attention spans. If I were doing this 2 years ago, I'd have this whole thing about metrics, about how many seconds people look at a mobile device versus tablets, etc. We all know that. We don't really need to know. Basically, the takeaway is that the important thing is that everything that you write is going to be translated by somebody. I can't tell you the number of people I run into that say, oh, well, we just work in English. We sell in North America, and we have French Canadian, but it's really just in English. Well, you may be posting or publishing only in English. Somebody is translating your text with machine translation. So everything that I say is relevant to you, to your future global audience. This is just a quick before and after of what Simplified English can do. Believe it or not, this is basically the same text. It was how to register organ donation in one particular state, and basically using some of the tools I'm going to talk about, you could actually reduce that first paragraph down to the paragraph that's over there. Those of you that saw Marsha Ryford Johnston earlier, you're going to see some how much money you can save in a couple of slides. I did not use her permission, but you might see her face pop up once or twice. Moving beyond that, some other examples of improved content from controlled English. This is an example from a Adobe partner called Maxit. There are several companies out there, Acrolinks, Maxit, I think SDL also does similar things, and they have terrific tools that will integrate directly with FrameMaker, Microsoft Word, whatever your authoring tool is, and it works like translation memory, and it will actually realize that you have typed a simpler sentence before and present that to you. So you're basically being guided or prompted into doing word reduction. Basically, all the words in color are being replaced for different reasons, database containing, gerunds, etc. Okay, so for first example, if we won't take the time due to our short time here, but if we were to really pause and read this paragraph, it probably doesn't sound that bad. It probably feels pretty normal. In fact, it's written pretty much in the style that a lot of us are kind of natively prone to do, somewhat in a passive voice or whatever. Let's take a look at this. This is what Simplified English will do to documentation for instrumentation. Now, I should mention that all of the examples I'm using are like aerospace, very strictly, heavily government-regulated text that's perhaps much stricter than what you have to do, but they are all good guidelines and they all work for just good basic writing, including increasing the reading comprehension and customer retention for an English-only audience. So here is the after. It can actually reduce the text by 30%. And if Marcia Reifert Johnston were in the room, I'm sure she would bounce in here and say, wow, you just saved 20. Is she? Oh, there she is. This is going to sound like pardon the word. Now, this is going to sound like I'm really overly pushing Marcia, but the reason is I've actually read her book 6 times. In fact, as per my review, one of them had so many highlighter pen marks it looked like a thermal map. So I'm on my 3rd hard copy, and I also have Kindle. I read it daily. It's almost like the Gideon Bible. It's always wherever I go. So we're going to start out with, I'm going to go into ASD, Aerospace Defense, STE 100, which is a standard for Simplified English. This is kind of one of the strictest standards you can get. It's sometimes as part of the Sigma 6 specification, which is used for anybody who does airline manufacture. I'm picking that as kind of the strictest one, but you're going to find that the 10 rules for it all work quite well for the content we have to create. So this is, anybody who'd like to read the definition, blank, because it's going to go away. Look it up on Wikipedia. Okay, rule number 1. I told you, slides are available, they got links and everything, you're going to love it. Okay, the first thing is write positive statements. And it's amazing how many people had parts of their presentations that were like lifted out of what I did, or maybe I was psychic and tuned into what they were doing. Use an active voice. Okay, so a good example is people will frequently say such and such was sent. I used to write meeting notes in politically charged situations that would say, it was observed that it is possible that profits may have changed due to circumstances from certain departments, not, just that bad. I survived 5 layoffs that way, but it wasn't real good for language translation. I kid you not. Also a hint, and to the, not to get any gender thing, but now that we're fortunate enough to have a lot of women CEOs, if you have a male or female CEO and you're the right gender, follow them into the restroom because that's where you find out what's going on. People are like at their most vulnerable then, and you'll be amazed what comes out. Like, I really need that new laptop, and voila. Anyway, here's a good example. CBIT test result was sent to the server. The server received the test result. It's actually much stronger, but also this will translate better. The passive voice does not translate well into many languages. And even though you may have translation memory or whatnot, professional linguists have to pause each and every time that each and every is redundant. They have to pause every time that happens because they have to stop and think about it. So the cleaner it is, it will do beautifully with machine translation. Has been read. How about BIT read the file? Subject, object, action, noun, verb. A lot of it just goes back to basic sentence diagramming. This is one that we'll hear a lot. Anybody who's familiar with Val Swisher of Content Rules, she'll always say something like, so many words, write shorter sentences. If I could say one thing, write shorter sentences. Okay, that's true, but what kind of shorter sentences? So here's a wrong example. We won't read the whole thing, but by the time you get to the second line, you're not quite sure what's going on. Here's a series of short sentences. Loosen the 4 screws and remove the cover. You're just very clear, bing, bing, bing. At the very end, I have some fun exercises that can help change your life, change your ways, that make cats come to you when you're writing. I proved it. It really works. I'm not kidding. I have a cat I could have brought here anyway. One topic per sentence. This is and I'll also make a comment here too. I think we have a more than average intelligent audience here. A lot of you are very bright and probably Mensa level, if whether you took the test or not. The brighter you are, the more difficult it is to distill down to one topic per sentence because your mind forks off and you're capable of you're capable of perceiving that, and so your fingers just start putting 6 things in when you shouldn't. So here's one where we've got a number of them, and here we've cut it down to the PBIT log shows the start values. Each censor writes new. Now we have actually saved some words here. We cut one sentence down from 26 to 20 words. And if Marsha Ryford Johnson was in the audience, it'd be, wow, you just saved $7,200 in 48 languages. And by the way, I kept using 48 languages because that's what I was doing 3 years ago. A lot of companies like Google and Twitter are probably more like 130 languages now. You know, it's all of the dialects of the Eastern European. Also, the 6 trivia, can anybody name which continent has the 6th fastest growing economies? Africa, yeah. So there's some dialects there that we've never worked with before, and that's going to be happening too. This one we've all run into, use valid nomenclature. It's very, very common, particularly from engineers. People just start to drift and come up with their own names for things. So some examples are, you know, you can pull common nouns together in groups. Bad example is the blow-off valve versus the pressure relief valve. In a nutshell, just be specific. That will make a huge difference. This, of course, can partly happen with the glossary terminology, but also tools like Acrolinks and Maxit. Write simple sentences. So you basically have 4 basic types of sentences: the statement, step and action, cause and effect, call-outs. This also goes with topic, concept, etc. with did XML. It dovetails really, really beautifully with that. And basically this just describes what a statement, description, or an explanation is. It's an article, a subject, a verb, and an object. So all that sentence diagramming you had back in 7th or sophomore high school, 7th grade sophomore, really was a value. We really do need to use that. Writing simple sentences. Here's another example. We actually have 3 slides on Rule 5. The scanner connector uses a 3-pin plug. Connect the scanner to a 3-pin plug. You know, so we have an action connecting. Almost done. Step and action, put switch in off, move the switch to the off position. My good friend John Smart, who happens to work for Maxit, gave a really good example of this. There's been several cases where a jet airline, not quite as bad as the recent Malaysia tragedy, but where a jet airline took off and crashed into the bushes. And one of them was because the original English said, it told the pilot, it said, apply moderate pressure to the foot pedal. You know, whatever they had in the way of an accelerator on an airplane, it was like apply moderate pressure. And that's kind of like if you find a Victorian cookbook, it will tell you to put something into a warm oven. And people who cooked with wood stoves knew what a warm oven is. I don't know. You know, that probably died in World War II. Who knows? Okay, other examples. Then we're almost to our rules here. Cause and effect. Writing simple sentences, you want to make sure that you write the condition or the cause. Somebody earlier today said it drives them crazy when documentation starts to receive to it. You know, then it will do this, it will do this, it will do that. This wreaks havoc with language translation. In fact, if you ever see an advertisement for Coca-Cola and it says, Coca-Cola, you will like it, you will put it in your refrigerator, you will take it with you. In Chinese, it will say Coca-Cola, 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 because it isn't really used in Chinese. It will sound strange to our ears, but it is the normal way to do it. So rather than test the voltage after the circuit, it is energize the circuit, then make a test of the voltage. So all of these examples are really just being more specific, no ambiguity, and you're absolutely, use a Phillips screwdriver to remove the 4 screws. You know, rather than, I mean, this is very natural for us using a Phillips screwdriver. I start all my letters on my blogs that way. It just feels good, bad for the rest of the world, don't do it. Call out table section headings. I'm just going to skip this one because it's so obvious. I don't think you need any help on it, so we'll just fly over that one. This has been mentioned several times. Use the active voice. And you might think, why is that such a problem? Now, I will say this. I'm a baby boomer. I've lived through a lot of presidents, lots of them. I miss Truman, barely, so I've been around that long. And there's something that I'm really excited about. There were a lot of active voices going on in the 1960s, and what I've observed is active voices coming back with millennials. Millennials are reincarnated people that died in the 1960s. Seriously. And you don't have like the culture, but it's like, you know, there's all this stuff about a generation gap. There's a generation gap for the generation in between, like your parents, but your grandparents are really cool, like me. So you don't have to like grandpa, like somebody else's grandpa, like me, and we will go out and change the world. That's why Portland has no freeways running through it. And that happened, and we can do it again. So anyway, the active voice is very important. This is a typical. The signal is received by the transponder rather than the transponder receives the signal. Apply a cleaning solvent. Clean the surface. And once again, it's pretty logical, and there is software to help you. This is one of the biggest ones is don't use gerunds. Most people don't remember what they are, but it's, bringing his intelligence to the table. He solved the problems of the world. Half the languages of the world won't take that. So it's, rather than installing the software requires 1 hour, you can install the software in 1 hour. And notice it says who you can install. Because when you think about it, a lot of our software installations are from the cloud or happen automatically. Like who updates Microsoft Windows? I just leave the room and crap happens. It's like all of a sudden it's saying ready to, it's ready to download 11 of 21 security things or something. I see that we have a few Apple people here. Check increasing temperatures, very obvious. I have 3 examples and we only needed 1. This one is very challenging for Americans. We're just really prone to do this. I think we're just born to do this from birth, and that is avoid using nouns as verbs. This happens all the time. In fact, there's so much of the vernacular where we can think of verbs that have just turned into nouns that have turned into verbs. It can be done if it's listed as a verb/noun in the dictionary. So rather than position the memory card, put the memory card in the correct position. And when you think about that, there's no room for doubt as to what that means. It's just, again, we're just being much more specific. Avoid conditional tenses, could, should, etc. The thing about the conditions is this gets back to who's doing it, okay? The other thing, this is a little bit like the passive voice. And when you think about it, is there any reason that you would ever say the lamp should turn to light green, like it should? Well, what if you do if it doesn't? Somebody mentioned this earlier, that parts of documentation sometimes raise more questions than they answer. That is one of them. You can also indicate a possibility using the auxiliary verbs like can. I tried to put this was my exciting slide where I gradually went to colors till we got to the best one. This is good, better, best. A broken thermometer causes problems. I mean, when you think about it, if you have a broken thermometer, unless you're going to stick it in a bird house and make it decorative, what possible good could it accomplish? Is there any redeeming value? I don't think so. Let's get rid of it. Avoid word clusters. I think, live, breathe, and dream in word clusters, so I need software to help me on this one. The key to set the waypoint for the GPS sensor is much, much better, or the interface from the data storage to the power unit. Still don't know what it means, but it sounds better to me. Also, this now for anybody who's worked, how many people here are engineers, or are you now, or have you ever been an engineer here at our Communist Party rally, or house of unengineering activities? Engineers tend to do this a lot. If somebody is on a keyboard for 14 hours, they just get bored, and rather than calling something a voltage regulator, it becomes a line regulator, whatever, and there's all sorts of cute names. It's hard to avoid because a lot of times we have beta and alpha code names, and that creeps in there too. So, install an intelligent cable. It's called a smart cable. That's the official name. This, of course, would come from like a lexicon or a dictionary. Now, don't laugh. Okay, this is the fun part. 30 seconds, 90 seconds here. I can see the timer whipping away. Right, I've got 20 seconds. Can't believe it. 20 minutes. I've got like 4.5 minutes. Watch me stretch it out. Okay, these are techniques, as Marcia knows. Marcia Ryford Johnston was at my presentation 3 years ago in Palm Springs, and she ran out and got 3x5 cards and a and a typewriter, and she wrote a best-selling book as a result of my magic powers and these incredible tools I'm ready to share with you now. Now, the thing of it is, these are things to do temporarily. I'm really not suggesting that somebody get rid of their iPad or computer, but there are, somebody mentioned earlier, using Post-it stickers, to storyboard. 3 people have mentioned typewriters. That is so Portland. Plug. If you have a typewriter, particularly if you get a really cool one from the 70s or 80s with those carbon ribbons, where do you go? There is a place in Southwest Portland called Pacific Typewriter, only open Tuesday through Friday. And this man has everything. Every time a business office closed, this guy bought their entire inventory, and he has over 200 IBM Selectrics, including tomato, yellow, and turquoise. I have everything except the tomato. I'm going to get it. But anyway, he's like my dealer. Instead of crystal meth, it's like typewriter stuff, and I'll start going like, do you have a Praxis? And all of it Praxis? Yeah. And I'll use it, and it really works. So don't laugh. I've tried all these things. Every one of these things works. Okay, these are things that you can do just to break your way of thinking and just feel different and write different, and I swear to God this will work. One of them is try writing an outline or a short story or a novel on a typewriter, preferably a manual. Now, I know that we have to be really careful with our behavior code and not do anything lewd to offend anybody, but I just cannot think of another way to say this. When you write on a manual typewriter and you're typing pretty good and you make a typo and you just keep on going, it feels like you're wearing a dark suit and you just peed in public and nobody knows it. I don't know of any other way to say that. I've never done that, but I have been told that if you're at this schnitzer and you're wearing navy blue and you keep your that supposedly that's a nice experience. We could only imagine. According to a former mayor, but anyway. And there's a cat connection coming up here for all of our cat lovers too. Another thing too is Post-it stickers are marvels. In fact, I have recently gone back to them. In the 80s, I did all of my project management with Post-it stickers on a manila folder, 2 sides. This isn't done, this is done. There's something so visual, you can tear it up or burn it, and the fact that it's not pixels on a screen, you will memorize those weirdo little square things. Okay, but there's also other advantages to it too. The biggest one is if you use a typewriter on your porch or in the backyard on a sunny day, I kid you not, every cat in the neighborhood will show up to be your muse. And here are a few examples of some writers, including my favorite. Mark Twain was the first novelist in the world to write a novel on a typewriter. The first, and he never had less than 7 cats, just about done. Okay, so how do you break long sentence writing patterns? This works really, really well. Actually try dictation rather than typing. Now this is so obvious, so logical, I don't know why 2 years later I'm the only person I know of still saying this. It should have been stolen and turned into a book by now. The reason is I say that we have 2 brains. We have your eye brain and you have your ear brain. Okay, and the biggest thing for us to overcome in writing, no matter what we're doing, is if you're writing on a screen, even if it's an iPad and you're just clicking away, your mind can remember more that it sees visually than it can when it hears. This is why broadcast journalism is so different from print journalism. This is very, very important. So try dictation. First of all, every time you pause for breath, that's the end of a sentence. That helps. And I said why, because we have 2 brains. The other thing that's interesting is when you do dictate, it will look real different. You'll write it in a different style, but it will look really different to you when you look at it and rewrite it. It'll come out almost perfect. You will be amazed at the difference that can make. Okay, and then I've seen statistics that, for instance, if you have a brief bulleted list, if you hear it, if you dictate or hear it on the radio, you can remember 3 things, but you can see and visually remember 5 things. So there's that much difference. So that gives you a good guideline for writing on small things. Another one is put topics or concepts on Post-it stickers, manila folder. It's also a good way to limit what you're doing, because if it doesn't fit on the Post-it sticker, it's too long. Don't try this in German. Because I have a friend in Germany who said you just can't do this. Okay, now this is the most controversial part. I already see some rickling about Martha Stewart here. I don't really care about any of these people. They just work. One of them is, when I moved to Portland is the elephant's graveyard of mid-century antiques. Everybody from California moved up here in the 80s. They carted all their stuff up here. Their kids don't want it, and they're selling it in the yards as they drop dead. Not trying to be crude or anything. This is like people a little older than me. If you get vintage cookbooks from the 40s and 50s, perfect. Martha Stewart, I don't know who writes for her, but she is a goddess when it comes to just getting out little bits of information in perfect bites. There used to be a thing called, you remember, you can learn from Martha every day. You can plant your own lavender, put it in a terracotta pot, dry it and make tea, and you have an attractive centerpiece. There's just that much. And it was like, it worked. I went out and did this, like I had a lavender. And a lot of people say, like, oh, Martha Stewart. By the way, on cookbooks, a recent study showed that modern cookbooks that you buy in Costco, like Paula Deen, Rachel Ray, all those people, the ones with all the photographs, over 80% of the recipes were inaccurate. They were never tested. People just wanted a cookbook that had a pretty chicken on it. No one ever bothered to type it all out. Another one is to break your thinking habits for writing differently. It's anybody who's written a novel you've read, in order to be a good writer, be a good reader. Okay, and I recommend Dorothy Parker. Most of you probably heard of her, I hope. Dorothy Parker wrote for The New Yorker, and she was a very successful humorist who published a lot of short stories in the 20s to the 60s. You will think it was written yesterday. Her work is so contemporary, it's frightening. This woman was a genius, but she had an absolute genius for creating a 3-word sentence that just kills you. Read her. Another one of my favorites, who's British, is E.F. Benton. He was the author of the Map and Lucia series. Dorothy was supposed to float in there. And do this with fiction, not tech manuals. Don't go and look for not good little tech manuals. You need to move your brain to another space, so just get away from what you do for a living. Finally, these are some of my favorite resources. Go to acrolinks.com, SmartNY, which is smart software. Finally, of course, you notice the bottom, Write Tight and Word Up by Marsha Raffer Johnson. If you have not taken her series, be sure to, because not only does she have a wonderful website, brilliant people have written reviews of her book. You know, I mean, what else could there be? Final thing is, here's a quiz. Does anybody know what's different about, what is the one thing about the state of Oregon flag from every other flag in the nation? Go ahead. Two sides. We did not have a flag till in the 20s. It was like the 150th, it was whatever was the unbicentennial, 1921 or something. Anyway, the 150th anniversary, all of the states were going to go to DC and fly a flag. Oregon didn't have one. We never got around to doing one. And just as our streets go in two different directions, they couldn't make up their minds, so there's two sides to the flag. And one of them is the be verb, because we are the beaver state. Probably a lot of you remember that, this is last 10 seconds, I promise. Probably a lot of you remember that about 3 years, actually it was right at the beginning of the recession, 2008, the Oregonian had a contest about redesigning the state flag. A lot of people thought it was kind of dumb, and there were some pretty clever things. You know, like there was like a white zigzag for the Cascades, green on one side, yellow on the other. My favorite one was some little children did a crayon drawing, and it's this little beaver holding an umbrella. And I thought, yes! Keeps the other people away. It's why things are lovely and green. So this closes with, if you want to take it to the max, all you have to remember is there are one N in my email and two N's in the Twitter that you have to follow. And the slides, which you'll all receive it soon in the future, has a link to upcoming webinars and recorded webinars. And with that, I'll take questions, if there's time. There we go.
There